Okay, this is Orlando Wilson, and what I'm going to talk about in this podcast slash video, we got them going out in both. This will be going out in two formats now. It's a case, an investigation case, if you want to call it that, I dealt with a number of years ago now. I'm talking about it because it's over 10 years old, and everybody involved, the people that's involved that I was working for and working with, everybody's dead. They're gone. And I think this case, I want to talk about it because it highlights a lot of problems that a lot of people encounter that they don't know how to deal with until they encounter them. When somebody dies unexpectedly, not only does it leave a lot of questions, it also leaves a lot of, how can I put it, logistical problems, legal problems for the people that's left behind to deal with. Especially as in this case, there was a lot of how can we say, messed up circumstances, very messed up. To sum this story up, the question was, a client of mine who I knew ended up dying, leaving home, moving to another town, moving away from Miami, moving to a city, and dying unexpectedly. And next to the body was a will from somebody he'd obviously, somebody that thought they were entitled to his stuff. Several wills turned up. It's a little bit of a screwed up story, and from my perspective, and also from the family's perspective and other people's perspectives, it was suicide, if not assisted suicide. But trying to get anybody to take the case seriously and look into it as a suicide or assisted suicide was impossible for various reasons, which I'll explain as we go along. A little bit of a backstory. The person that died was a firearms training student of mine, done numerous courses with me. He brought family members to do courses with me. So I knew him. He was a good guy. From how I knew him, very respectful, very good guy, professional. And he ended up moving away from, what I learned later, there was family issues, etc. He moved away to Central Florida, Alachua, the city of Alachua, where he bought a house, etc., etc. He moved there. He wasn't poor, let's put it that way. And he bought a house in the area. The family believes he took with him in assets such as gold and jewelry, family jewelry, about $300,000 worth of assets, jewelry and gold, which of course all disappeared. The guy was at the time, he must have been in his early 50s. But even though he wasn't in good health, there was no reason for him to just collapse and die. None. So I got the call because I knew him. I'd done some other things for him. I knew members of his family. I would class as friends, but I knew them professionally. And I got a call from one of the family members that had been wanting to tell me he was dead. And also they were the executor of the will, and they didn't want to be the executor of a will because the situation was too screwed up. And the executorship of the will was taken over by this guy's father that was a character in himself, who happened to be at that time in his early 90s. World War II veteran. He was a navigator on B-52s, was shot down over Germany, capturable, luckily fell into Russian hands. He was on active duty during Korea. He served in Korea, shot down in Korea, shot down twice, flying spotter planes. He retired a full bird colonel in the US Air Force. So this guy's father had a lot of spark in him, if we put it that way. One of the World War II guys that had a lot of spark, and he wasn't too happy about this situation in general. So he ended up having the executorship of the will, but again, a person in their early 90s is not able to run around and get things done. So they asked me to help them get things done. Now, when this person, and we'll call him, as we'll call him now, he's dead, his family's dead, his name was Martin Thomas. When he moved to Alachua, he moved there with assets, he moved there with money. And like always, people latched on to him. A couple of local guys, well, one local guy latched onto him, his neighbor, because again, somebody has money. And again, moving to a new city, Martin had a few emotional issues and also turned out alcohol and drug issues. So again, people latch on to that type of person, especially when they have money. Another person latched onto him that happened to be the owner of a cleaning company that he hired to help him clean his house. But I'll get more into that story as we go along. So this is it. Whenever somebody moves somewhere, if they've got money, if they've got assets, people will latch onto them. It's the same, you see it, I've seen this in how many cases where people are dying. If they've got any property, if they've got any assets, people will latch onto them with the sole intent of when that person dies for them to take the assets, for them to hopefully be put in their will. And as I said, I think I said in the beginning, when Martin died, 2 wills turned up, apart from the will the family had. So in total, there was 3 wills. So when he died, apparently he was found in his kitchen, collapsed by one of the people, his neighbor, that had latched onto him. And there was a will next to him. So how many people die and they just happen to have a will next to them of his neighbor that lived across the road that just happened to find him? So 2 and 2 makes 4. When the neighbor found him dead, he took the will he had and put it next to the body so everybody would find it. That way he would be entitled to everything. And I said, Martin had some nice stuff. He had a house, apparently gold and everything else, but everything disappeared. So the fact to me, and in most people I've talked to, that somebody's dead and there's a will next to him, it stinks a little bit. It smells a little bit. When the police turned up, they went through the house. Again, there was a history there with Martin and the local police department, and I think they didn't like him too much anyway. They knew him. There'd been a few issues in the past, from what I understand. So what they done, the guy was dead on the floor, as they usually do, go through, pick up the pill bottles, found a pill bottle, and there was a lot of pill bottles in the house when I went there from various doctors. Apparently the cops had taken pill bottles with prescription medication, addictive medication, etc. So there was even more pill bottles than the empty pill bottles that were left. The cops had found a pill bottle, took the name of the doctor that was on the pill bottle, that prescribed the drugs, phoned him up and said, okay, one of your patients is dead, etc. And the doctor said, okay, yeah, sure, he's dead, he's under my supervision, whatever. Okay, the doctor was lying. Why? Because nobody had ever heard of that doctor. That doctor, we take it, was from a pill mill. And what I mean pill mill, a pain clinic that was just issuing out drugs. He was not Martin's regular doctor. The 2 people that latched onto Martin, that was his helpers, drivers, etc., they'd never heard of the doctor. Nobody'd heard of this doctor. But again, that happened to be the doctor, the cop that was on the pill bottle, that the cop picked up and phoned and said, yes, he's under my supervision. The fact that the doctor said, yes, he's under my supervision, meant there was no need for an autopsy. And this is pinnacle, because generally when somebody dies unattended, there has to be an autopsy. With Martin, there was no autopsy. Why? Because the doctor on the pill bottle said, he's under my supervision, etc., what they had to say legally. That way there would be no autopsy. So I take it when that doctor got the call, he most probably, to put it politely, crapped himself, and he knew what to say. That way he wouldn't be investigated for giving out too many pills. As with the other doctors on the other pill bottles that were found at the house. Martin was getting various drugs from various sources, all prescription, which he shouldn't have been getting. If he was going to a regular doctor, there's no way they'd be prescribing the amount of drugs he had. But this is a type of thing that happens a lot, and that's why you have the opioid epidemic in the US and such high drug use, because there are a lot of doctors that just prescribe medication. As I said, the doctor that was called that said there's no need for an autopsy was not known to the family, was not known to anybody. It was just somebody that, I take it, Martin had found to give him pills and he went and he got the pills. That's it. So at best, if it wasn't suicide or assisted suicide, it was an overdose. And somebody should have been held liable, but nobody was interested. That's it. And I'll get a little bit more onto that as we go along. So the lawyers, of course, lawyers were involved. The first person that went up there to solve this, that was named executor of the will, that didn't want to be the executor of the will, saw it was a crazy situation. They met the two people that had latched on to Martin. They didn't like them at all. When we run backgrounds, they both had criminal records. One, I understand, if I remember right, it's a long time ago now, had a felony domestic violence, was under a restraining order at the time all this was going on, was still carrying a firearm and was selling firearms, Martin's firearms. The other person was just questionable. Respectable, and on the surface respectable, running a respectable business, but as I go on, I'll explain more, was questionable. So the lady that was named executor, that didn't want to be executor, it wasn't her world. Very respectable lady, very nice lady, and this wasn't her world. She had hired a lawyer that was as much use as wet toilet paper. He just wanted billing, that's it. He did minimal throughout all of this. I met him multiple times, dealt with him multiple times, and useless. Didn't want to do anything. Didn't want to get involved. Put it this way, he's that type of lawyer. He was phoning up the colonel, Martin's father, Colonel Thomas, phoning him up and talking to him about BS. And the colonel was calling me up saying, why is this guy calling me all the time? He found out when he got his bill, because the lawyer was phoning him up and talking to him about BS and then billing him for the phone calls as being consultations. That's the type of person, that's the type of lawyer we're dealing with. But for some reason, he was already into it. I think the colonel had already paid him a chunk of money, so he was going to use up what money he'd already paid him. So this is, again, be very careful what lawyers you get. And again, this needs to be pre-planned. Make sure you're getting a lawyer that's actually going to be doing their job properly. They're just not there to suck money out of you, which a lot of lawyers are. But again, that's one of the mistakes the lady made. Well, I'm not going to say the lady that was up there that was initially executive of will made any mistakes, because one, she was very distraught that a close family member died, and she's in a situation now, she's trying to deal with a lot of different problems and dealing with a lot of questionable people. So again, the issue was, after somebody's dead, there's always assets. And even if everybody's trying to grieve for the person that's dead, the realities come down to what's going to happen to their assets. There was property with plenty of equity in it. A lot of stuff had gone missing at the time. The family wanted to know where the family jewelry had gone. Martin had a lot of nice stuff. All this was under probate. In theory, can't be touched, etc. The executor had to deal with all this. And the fact the executor is a 91-year-old man in over 400 miles away, not really fit to travel, makes it very, very difficult. So you have to deal with bank accounts, etc., etc. What was found was the bank accounts were empty. Everything had been spent, everything was gone. Martin had been giving away a lot of stuff. When I spoke about the jewelry to them, they said there's no way he would give away the jewelry, because it was some of it was his mother's, grandmother's, etc. They were family heirlooms, and he would not have given them away. And I can see that to some aspect, because he always spoke kindly about his mother. I can't see him giving away or pawning his mother's jewelry. But it's one indication that somebody's going to be committing suicide or thinking about suicide is they give away all their assets. They spend everything because they're not going to need it. They're not thinking of the future because they're going to be dead. So to me, that was another red flag. This was suicide or assisted suicide. But so I said, during this investigation, We done the backgrounds on the 2 people that latched onto him, minor criminal stuff over the years, etc. Trying to go to the police and talk to the police about this, they weren't interested. They weren't interested about as we say, the theory of suicide or assisted suicide. They weren't particularly interested in the fact that stuff had been sold, firearms had been sold, and most likely sold by a person with, if I remember right, a domestic violence felony, which means they couldn't be around firearms. And that person was also carrying a firearm on several occasions, one of Martin's firearms. When we put this in front of them, not interested. And I went and spoke to numerous people at the Al-Achwa police department with members of the family. One of Martin's uncles went up there with me numerous times, and they wanted answers. This didn't make sense. Even though Martin was, we can sum up as a pain in the ass, had drug and alcohol issues, there's no reason for him to collapse and die. And they wanted answers, but nobody was willing to give the answers. One of the issues was there was no autopsy. And again, I said this now, if a body is found unattended, there needs to be an autopsy. No autopsy was given. And this was, I would say, from my perspective, the cops' fault, because they phoned up the wrong doctor. They phoned up a doctor on a pill bottle instead of looking and saying, okay, one, there's too many pill bottles here from numerous doctors, we have a problem, and actually finding out who Martin's real doctor was, and then asking. I take it to them, it was a closed case, the guy's dead, thank you very much, next, we've got better things to do, we're going to go fishing. So one of the issues with proving anything was there's no autopsy. To get a body exhumed, and he wasn't cremated, he was buried, to get a body exhumed and then to have a private autopsy would cost a lot of money. The fact that everybody concluded that it was, let's say, possibly the police fault and possibly the police's issue that there was no autopsy in this case, which could have been suicide or assisted suicide. If it went to court and the city lost, if they were sued for this and they lost, then they would be liable for the expenses of digging up the body, having the autopsy done, etc. There's a lot of money involved, and also emotional distress to the family, etc. So this is where I'd say it was in the police department's interests not to pursue things, which they did by not pursuing things. They wanted everything to go away, and we hit brick walls, period. From Al-Achwa Police Department, the sheriffs, everybody, because the family wanted to make a lot of noise over this because they wanted to know what happened to Martin. Anyway, the attorneys come up with the idea, and again, we get depositions from these people, the 2 people that latched onto him, everybody involved. That way we've got evidence to go to the police to say, look, there's been wrongdoing here. And the 2 people that latched onto him, the person's neighbor, the alcoholic neighbor, and the cleaner has come, done the depositions and said everything we wanted them to say. Admitting to selling firearms, admitting, if I remember right, selling firearms, carrying firearms with domestic violence, restraining order on the guy. And the strange thing was, this is how screwed up the situation was. The guy with the cleaning company, and this came out in the deposition, we don't know why, and this is how weird things were, how drugs can affect people. Turned up, and when he's giving the depot, and again, these people, in their minds, all they're thinking about is their wills. As I said, there was 3 wills. One from a guy with the cleaning company that was attacked, that latched onto Martin. His neighbor that latched onto him, that was acting, in his words, is security come driver, complete BS. And his father's will, the family will. The 2 people that latched on, all they were thinking was they wanted the house, they wanted the assets, they wanted what's in the house, because there was equity in the house. So they'll do anything and say anything to try and seem to be the one that their will is the legitimate will. And these days, wills are easy to forge. The signatures are easy to forge. And going to the place where the wills were notarized and saying to the notary, was the person that signed these in their right mind? Of course they're going to say they're in the right mind, because if they had somebody sign to sign something in front of them and they were drunk under the influence of drugs, that notary as themselves have broken the law by allowing that person to notarize a document because they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or they don't seem right. So no notary is going to self-convict themselves. But the depositions, the guy with the cleaning company trying to come out with, and everybody was shocked with this one. When I heard it, I thought, well, when the colonel reads this, he's going to go absolutely ballistic, which he most probably did, but not in my presence. The guy with the cleaning company said he went to clean Martin's house, and Martin always paid good, tipped good. Martin told him he was constipated, and asked him if he would give him an enema. If you don't know what an enema is, then ask Google. And the guy with the cleaning company said, yeah, sure, it'd help him. Okay. I think even the lawyer said that everybody was shocked when this came out. It's okay, do you give enemas to all your clients? Put it this way, who in their right mind is going to ask a stranger for an enema? Who in their right mind, if they just meet somebody for the first time, you're there cleaning their house or providing a service, and somebody asks you for an enema, are you going to say, yeah, sure, no problems, I'll give you one? And that in itself, whether the guy was saying it to try and prove what a good friend he was to Martin or whatever, says how screwed up things were, and things weren't working properly in anybody's minds. So this is just a little bit I'm touching on here, where you can see why the lady that was initially the executor of the will said, I don't want anything to do with this, because he was a little crazy. And this is why I want to get this out there, because crazy things happen to a lot of people, a lot of ordinary people that just want to live ordinary lives and quiet lives, end up getting in crazy situations like this one. So with all this, even with the depositions, we went back to the police, put the depositions in front of them, gave them copies, went to the sheriffs, gave them copies. The depositions was put out there. What happened? Absolutely nothing. And you got to remember, when somebody dies, all their property and all the estate goes into probate. Nobody can touch anything until everything's cleared up, etc. And it takes time. Some probates take 2 years, if not more, especially if people are arguing. This one had 3 wills, so it was a mess. So what was decided? The colonel decided that nobody's getting anything. He stopped the mortgage payments on the house, and there was, I think the house was something like $160,000. Again, it's a rural part of the state of Florida. And there was like about $100,000 worth of equity in the house. So it was worthwhile people fighting over. The colonel decided then and there, we're not doing any mortgage payments, we're not paying any bills, let it go. Let the bank take it, nobody's having anything. He didn't need the money, so it was like, okay, screw everybody. We'll just cut everything, let it go to, let the bank reclaim it, which they did in the end. So nobody got anything. Now the big question was what happened with the gold and the family jewelry. And I said there was about, he went up there, and he wasn't up there that long, with about $300,000 worth of assets. As we said, he could have given the gold away, he could have given things away, but the family's concern was he would not have given away his mother's jewelry, etc. Who knows where it went? It disappeared. Could we prove anything? No. Even if we found the stuff, the people that pawned it could have said, okay, he gave it to me. We couldn't have proved different. And that happens in a lot of cases. The thing is, when he was found dead, and I've seen this happen in multiple cases, the first people in the house after somebody's died, and again, especially where caregivers are concerned, especially where people that latch on to people are concerned, they're already scoping out what assets somebody's got, what's worth money, what they can take. So the first person in that house that happened to be a neighbor He sees his money ticket has just died, was dead on the floor. So what does he do? He has to look after himself. So he finds his will and puts his will next to the body. Okay, so again, a lot of people like that, they're not that stupid. So would it been within his scope to go to where Martin kept his jewelry, kept his gold, kept his valuables, and just take them? I can't say yes, I can't say no. I just say such things happen. And a lot of assets went missing and nobody knows where they went. But I've seen such things happen in other cases where people have died. And how can I put it politely? The vultures come out. People take things because they think this person's dead and they don't need them. If there's no family members around, the vultures will come out to feed. And again, as I said, I've seen this in multiple cases. If you know somebody, and this lesson from this, that's living alone, that's possibly going to die, that's on their way out, make sure their assets are secure. If they have a caregiver, make sure the caregiver is, how can I put it, vetted out and checked out. If they have somebody that latches onto them, and this is a problem, a lot of old people have caregivers latch onto them, especially if they don't have any family. They don't have any family, who cares? It's sad to say. But if they have family and somebody latches onto them, a lot of these supposed caregivers, when that person dies, they're thinking, all that's going through their mind is, I want my piece. And you can take it for granted that things will go missing, valuables will go missing. So if you have a family member like that, try and get their assets secure, or at least valuables, jewelry, etc., family heirlooms, put into a safe, and make sure the caregiver does not have the combination to the safe. As I said, the case of Martin, if you ask me, it was at best an overdose. But I would most probably say assisted suicide. But again, nobody was interested. Why? Because it would open up too much of a can of worms, especially after, as I said, the body would need to be exhumed and an autopsy would need to be done. It would cost a lot of money. This is where when people die unexpectedly, in a lot of places, the true cause of death is not going to be put on the death certificates. A lot of doctors in a lot of places, for various reasons, generally, especially something comes to mind from UK, where somebody died. I had various stories about how the person died. And on their death certificate, it was they died from pneumonia. And the people that were around the person when they died was like, it wasn't pneumonia. They never had pneumonia. But a lot of doctors, especially in UK, National Health, will write off somebody's dying from pneumonia because, again, they don't have time to open up a kettle of worms and look into things deeper. They don't have the resources. So this is where I'm very questionable when I see a lot of death certificates and it says things like pneumonia, or the person died from a heart attack where there was no indication they had a heart condition. I take it a lot of people that's died under questionable circumstances in the US, UK, and other places these days, it's all been written off as COVID. So you'd never get the true cause of death. If Martin had died, I'm sure these days it would have been written off as COVID. But again, this is the type of thing you're dealing with. So again, to summarize this, in such situations where people die unexpectedly, one, there's going to be issues as far as their immediate assets are concerned. The chances are they're going to be stolen. There's going to be issues as far as the probate is concerned. Ensure the person has a will. As I said, in Martin's case, there turned out to be 3 wills. And again, the signatures on 2 of the wills to the caregivers were scratches. So he wasn't in a state of mind to sign the wills Whether it's down to him taking drugs, him being given drugs, or him being drunk, who knows? But again, and there's plenty of people in those situations. If you have a family member that's like that, you can try and talk sense to them, or at least be prepared for the worst and have procedures in place to deal with the outfall. If they die, assets need to be secured, bank accounts need to be secured. So you have to work out a response to that situation. Have a trusted lawyer already in place that's not going to screw you over and take advantage of the situation. And again, if assets go missing, there's very little you can do about it, especially stuff like gold and jewelry, because it can always be broken down, melted down, or people just go to a different area to sell it, especially if we're talking $300,000. Somebody can take a nice little road trip, go to various pawn shops, and just sell a little bit here, sell a little bit there, so they don't draw attention to themselves. So again, I hope from this story, and again, let me finish up about dealing with law enforcement. A lot of police, again, same as doctors, they're too busy, they don't want the problems, they're not interested in extended cases, etc. They want things done as quickly as possible so they can go drink coffee, eat donuts, go fishing, etc. So again, in a case like Martin's, where things smelt a little bit, I don't think they wanted to smell the smell. The person was dead, they didn't know he had family that actually cared, and so okay, he's gone, goodbye, move on, we got better things to do. But again, he did have family that wanted, one, they wanted to know what really happened, because it was strange why he died, how he died, and also from their perspective, there was a lot of family heirlooms that went missing. I think if it was just the gold that went missing, because he had some gold bars, gold coins, it was just the gold that went missing, they wouldn't have cared if they got the family heirlooms back, but they didn't get anything. The other stuff, the house, they didn't care about. They'd already lost a son, so son, cousin, etc., close family member. So they weren't particularly worried about the assets, they wanted the family heirlooms back, but everything disappeared. And again, the law enforcement, they weren't particularly interested. So in a lot of those situations, I'll say you're going to be on your own to deal with this. So if you see somebody going down that track, try and put some procedures in place for dealing with the worst outcome. I know people don't like to think about this type of thing. A lot of people live in a bubble until somebody dies, and then they start thinking about it. You know what? Death is the only certain thing in life. So start thinking about it now and start putting plans and procedures in place that if somebody dies, especially if they're living a little bit of a raunchy lifestyle or they have addiction issues and they can die at any time, put some plans and procedures in place, even if you don't want to think about it. Put something in place that if something does happen, you have a response. You know how to deal with it. Because with this case, it was a mess from the beginning. As I said, there was no autopsy. I think if there had been an autopsy and what chemicals in his blood were found, there would have been questions. If the cops had actually looked at the multitude of pill bottles and worked out, yeah, this guy's got an addiction, this could be an overdose. If people were spoken to and there was a little bit of an investigation, I think people could have said, yes, this was suicide, or I would say possibly an assisted suicide. But such things will never be proven because nobody's interested. At the end, we were pushing this, myself and another family member, we were pushing this and we were giving people grief about this. And we met with, I think the last time I went to Alachua, we met with the police chief, happened to be a new police chief at the time, because this was going on for quite a while. And he summed things up, he said, okay. And they've done a very slick move. They said, okay, we'll keep the case open. We won't close the case. And in some ways that can say, okay, yes, we're keeping the case open. If anything new turns up, then we'll deal with it, etc. It shows they're concerned. To me, there was a very wise move on their part, because by keeping the case open, we couldn't have access to the photographs, we couldn't have access to the reports, we couldn't have access to anything. So it's impossible for us to prove anything, or possibly police incompetence, or take, there was pictures taken of how he died and all the rest of it. I take it there should have been pictures taken of the will next to the body. We could get our hands on them. And if we could, then we could possibly use that for leverage by going to the media, etc., and saying, okay, this is a screwed up situation. How can somebody that's just apparently died for no apparent reason, and he's found with a will next to him, how can this be normal? How is this normal anywhere? I don't think it would be normal in most places. But when you're dealing in rural parts of the US, strange things happen. So I hope this story has been a little bit enlightening, and it's giving you a few things to think about, especially if you have family members that are, how can I put it, family members that might have addiction issues, might be going through psychological problems, etc., which could be classed as these days mental health problems, or just estranged from the family and have assets and have people that's latched onto them, or somebody that's living away and have nobody to keep an eye on them. Because a lot of, how can I put it, as I say in a lot of my videos, the criminals, the scumbags of the world are always looking for victims. They're always looking for targets. If they see somebody that's a possible victim where they can make money off, they will target that person, and they don't have scruples. So you need to be aware of, if you have vulnerable people in your family or within your circle, then maybe they need somebody to keep an eye out on them, and also for them to be guided a little bit. And you can try and keep the wolves at bay as much as possible. I don't want to say wolves, I like wolves. Keep the rats at bay. But again, a lot of it's down to that person's decision. And when somebody dies, you can guarantee that once you get past the emotional issues, there's always going to be a lot of practical issues that need to be taken care of. And a lot of people don't want to think about those practical issues until the person's dead. You know what? My advice, think about them a lot longer before the person dies. Start thinking about them now. So, as I said, I hope this has given you a few things to think about. I'm throwing up a lot more of, going to be throwing up a lot more of these videos / podcasts. We're putting them out in both formats now. So follow me along on social media. Follow along my blog, The Truth Only Has Few Friends. From security and firearms issues, go over to Risk Incorporated. Check our blog out there. Check out our social media. And all I can say is be good, stay safe, and stay out of trouble. But remember, we're all going to die at some point. So you might as well think about it now and put plans in place, because when somebody dies, there's generally a lot of emotional issues to deal with, and people aren't going to be thinking of the practicalities. You know what? The scumbags of the world understand that. So that's the time they will take advantage of the situation to rob, loot, steal, and benefit whichever way they can from the person passing. So I hope this gives you quite a few things to think about.